class. Welcome Sakirati, Shamananda, welcome Saragrahi, welcome Ananga Manjari, and welcome Braja Sundari. I'm very happy to be here in your company today. And today's topic is serving the Bhagavata. Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Parakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha Umagyanati Virandasya Gyanangana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaur Tvishe Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinavando Jagatpate Upesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavanishari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriya Raya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasri Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Kevalam Kalo Nastyeva Gatiranyatha. So again, dear devotees, welcome to today's class. Welcome Krishna Kumari, who's also joined us. I'm very lucky to be here with you today. It's always a lucky day when you get to associate with Vaishnavas. But today is a particularly lucky day because today is a very a day filled with sanctity. Today is Ekadashi, the day of Hari, Krishna's favorite day of all the days of the lunar calendar. Ekadashi, as I'm sure we all know, comes 11 days after the full moon and the new moon, 11 lunar days after that. And there are fairly complicated ways how to calculate which day is Ekadashi. But in general, we can say like 11 days after full moon and after new moon. Today is the Ekadashi known as Pashankusha Ekadashi. Every Ekadashi, probably you've noticed on the calendar, has a particular name. Pashankusha, or sometimes called Papankusha Ekadashi. It's one of the last Ekadashis of the year. We have a few more to go. Pashankusha means a hook of a rope. So we could call it the lasso Ekadashi or something like this. The implication is that this is a rope by which we will catch hold of the personality of sin, Papa, and pull him by the neck away from us and away from each other. Because Ekadashi, like any of the Vaishnava celebrations, is a celebration that we do together with others. That's why I'm so happy to be here together with all of you on Ekadashi, having the opportunity to speak and hear about Krishna on this holy day. There are books that contain stories about the different Ekadashis. These stories are usually given within the Puranic genre called Mahatmya. Mahatmya means greatness. Literally, that's what Mahatmya means, greatness. And Mahatmyas are parts of many Puranas. And Mahatmyas, what they do is they describe a particular holy place or a particular holy observance. And And then they also describe what happens when you visit that holy place or when you perform that observance. And the descriptions are always in very hyperbolic terms. So every single place is the most holy place in the three worlds. And every single Ekadashi, every single observance is the most powerful observance that there is. Similarly with these Ekadashis, this Ekadashi is the best of all Ekadashis, and that Ekadashi is also the best of all Ekadashis. So this is the style of these texts. And they often contain stories as well, these kind of short, simple, often quite humorous stories about how a particular place became a sanctified place, or how it became so powerful, or perhaps how people in the past have benefited from these places or these observances. One of the Puranas which contains many of these stories is the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. And there are several editions of books about Ekadashi that contain these stories about the different Ekadashis. Unfortunately for us, Pashankusha Ekadashi is described in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, but it doesn't have a cool story, unlike practically all the other Ekadashis. So we're unlucky in this way. But there is a story I found somewhere online, just kind of the bare kernel of a story of a hunter who lived in the Vindhya hills in South India, and his name was Krodhaka. Basically means the cruel one. And hunters, I mean, they can have different kind of images in different cultures. In North America, the trappers, they are kind of the forerunners of civilization and so on. And hunters can have kind of a romantic aspect in other cultures as well. In India, hunters are the worst. If you want to describe a really bad person, then you just have to say that he's a hunter. So this Krodhaka, he's this typical hunter. He not only he kills animals, he also robs people, he murders them, he does all kind of terrible things until Yamaraj is tired of him and goes to pick him up. But then when he sees Yamaraj coming, for some reason he recognizes that Yamaraj is coming, he runs to the local temple, the temple of Padmanabha, Vishnu, and asks for help. And Padmanabha Vishnu tells him, if you want to be freed from the fear of death, then you should observe Pashankusha Ekadashi. You should fast during the day. You should stay awake during the night, singing kirtan and reading the scriptures and doing puja and things like that. And then all of your sins will go away. So he does that. And lo and behold, all his sins are wiped away. And he goes to Vaikuntha after he dies. So it's one of these kind of strange stories about how Ekadashi can take away anything bad from our lives. And the point is actually true. In the Hari Bhakti Vilasa, Sanatana Goswami writes extensively about Ekadashi in the 12th, 13th chapters. And one of the points that he makes is that Ekadashi does remove sin. But, Sanatana Goswami says, that's not why Vaishnavas observe Ekadashi. That may be why ordinary people observe Ekadashi. Like this hunter, he was scared of going to hell. So he did Ekadashi. Very good. But the reason why Vaishnavas observe Ekadashi is Hari Prinanatvat, because they know that Ekadashi is a day that is dear to Hari, dear to Krishna. So by observing Ekadashi, they are increasing their devotional activities. It's not that they're doing something different on Ekadashi that they're not doing on other days. They do exactly the same things, but maybe a little bit more. So they chant maybe a little bit more, they read more, they increase their devotional activities. Not because they are afraid of Yamaraja, not because they want to go to heaven, but because they want to please Krishna. They know that whatever that is done on this day is particularly dear to Krishna. So we're lucky to be here together on Ekadashi, Pashankusha Ekadashi. This class I've entitled Serving the Bhagavata. My previous classes in this series have all been about the Srimad Bhagavatam. I've spoken about the greatness of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the speciality of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I've also spoken about some of the obstacles of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I've tried to illuminate the Bhagavatam from different angles of vision. There's a famous verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam that says, Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular service to the Bhagavata, almost all of the inauspicious things of the heart will be removed. And bhakti will be established in the self as an irrevocable fact. This is more or less Prabhupada's translation. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. By constant or uninterrupted or regular service to the Bhagavata, bhakti will become naishtiki, nishta or steady. A kind of steady devotion will arise in us. Bhagavata Seva, service to the Bhagavata, means, of course, serving the Bhagavata in any way that we can. It means copying the Bhagavata. It means doing puja to the Bhagavata. We can, like we see in India, many devotees are doing before they start class. They will offer incense to the book. They might put a tulsi leaf with some chandan at the beginning of the book. It can also mean reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's also one way of serving the Bhagavatam, to read the Bhagavatam with feeling, to read the Bhagavatam with faith and with the effort to understand the meaning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But of course, as I'm sure we all know, Bhagavata Seva can also mean service to the person Bhagavata. Bhagavata means something that is related to Bhagavan or Bhagavat. So Bhagavata can mean the book that is related to Bhagavan, that is the Srimad Bhagavata or the Bhagavata Purana. Or Bhagavata can also mean the person that is a devotee of Bhagavan. So the Vaishnava. In ancient texts, Vaishnavas are often called Bhagavatas. The Srimad Bhagavatam also uses this term quite often. Instead of speaking about Vaishnavas, it speaks about Bhagavatas. So Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya means by regular, uninterrupted, constant service to the Bhagavata Purana or to the person Bhagavata. Almost all of the inauspicious things of the heart will be cleansed away, and firm devotion to the Lord, Uttama Shloka, the Lord of that is praised with the highest poems, will be established. And one way of serving the Bhagavata, the person Bhagavata, is glorifying the Bhagavata. We may not feel that we are very qualified to do personal service to Bhagavatas. We may be far away from other Bhagavatas. We may live in a city where we just have a few other Vaishnavas and we're not even always able to meet those. But one thing that we can do is we can constantly try to glorify the Vaishnavas. And again, we are very lucky, because not only is this Pashankusha Ekadashi, I'm not 100% sure about your locations, but at least here in Finland, we have Pashankusha Ekadashi today. But we also have something very special today, at least here in Finland. We had a disappearance day of 3 wonderful Bhagavatas. So I will try to glorify these Bhagavatas by speaking about them today. Today is the disappearance day of Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Dasa Goswami, and Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami. So 3 Goswamis have their disappearance day today. Sometimes these 3 Goswamis are called the Teen Goswami, or the Teen Goswami just means 3 Goswamis in Bengali, but they also have a joint Samadhi monument at Radhakund. So if we were even a little bit more lucky than we are, we could be there at Radhakund, and we could go to the Teen Goswami Samadhi, and we could roll in the dust there. At least we can do that mentally, imagining ourselves rolling in the dust by these 3 Goswami Samadhis. Let's begin with Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. Raghunath Bhatta Goswami is one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Raghunath Bhatta Goswami is among the 6 Goswamis the one that we know the least about. I'm still waiting for my colleagues in the natural sciences to finally come up with the time machine. And as soon as they do, I'm hoping to jump into the time machine and go back to the time of the Goswamis and get to know Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. Because whatever we know about him is wonderful, but it would be so much nice to know more about him. He's one of these persons that you really get the feel that we don't know enough. Raghunath Bhatta Goswami was the son of Tapan Mishra. Tapan Mishra was a Brahmin from East Bengal, living by the Padma River in East Bengal, today's Bangladesh. He met Mahaprabhu when he was a young man. He was wondering about the big questions of life. He didn't manage to find any good answers. And then he had a dream that he should go to this place nearby, and there he would meet a great scholar and a great saint who would be able to answer all of his questions. So he did so. And he met Mahaprabhu, who wasn't really Mahaprabhu yet. He was Nimai Pandit still. He was still in his Grihastha ashram, still married to his first wife. He had gone to East Bengal on a tour to teach and to make money. This is what Brahmins used to do. They would go on these teaching tours and collect donations. So he was doing that, and he met Tapan Mishra there. And Tapan Mishra put all of his difficult questions to Nimai Pandit, and Nimai Pandit answered all of them. But in this particular Leela, he didn't behave like Nimai Pandit usually does. Nimai Pandit is usually this puffed up scholar who smashes the pride of everybody. But here, he took a very sweet and Vaishnava style of presentation. This is still before his conversion into Vaishnavism. But here he kind of showed some of the things that were to come. He, for example, taught Tapan Mishra the Maha Mantra. Sometimes devotees ask, where is the Maha Mantra in Chaitanya Charitamrita? And the answer is simple, it's nowhere. It's not even once mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. But it is mentioned in the Chaitanya Bhagavata, which is older than the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it's mentioned in this particular context, when Nimai Pandit is teaching Tapan Mishra. And Tapan Mishra was so charmed by Nimai Pandit that he wanted to move to Navadvip, to be able to stay with him forever. But Nimai Pandit said, no, I'm not going to. I will tell you a secret. I'm not going to stay in Navadvip forever. Instead, you should go to Varanasi. You should settle there, and one day I will come there. So he did so. Tapan Mishra and some other Vaishnavas, including Chandrasekharacharya, they settled in Varanasi. And after many years, Nimai Pandit came there, this time as Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And for 2 months, he stayed in Varanasi. He used to live in the house of Chandrasekharacharya, but he would take his meals in Tapan Mishra's house. So for 2 months, Tapan Mishra got this association that he had been hankering for his whole life. And his son, Raghunath Bhatta, he got to serve Mahaprabhu at that time. And he got so enchanted by Mahaprabhu's divine ecstasies and his overflow of divine love that he went to Jagannath Puri to stay with Mahaprabhu. He stayed there for a few months until Mahaprabhu sent him back. He said that I love you and I'm very happy that you came here, but I want you to go back and take care of your parents. They're old and they need your help. Last Sunday, we heard Guru Maharaj speak about how when we are children, our parents are our parents, then they become our friends, and then when they get older, they become kind of our children again. So it was his time now to take care of his parents, but taking care of him when he was a kid. So he did that for about 4 more years. He took care of his parents until they passed away, and then he came back to Jagannath Puri. And he stayed with Mahaprabhu there for some more time until Mahaprabhu sent him to Vrindavan, to Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis, who were there already. In Vrindavan, Raghunath Bhatta did not write a single book. And that's why we don't know so much about him. He doesn't have the same kind of role as this kind of literary master of our Sampradaya. Instead, it is said that he did mainly 2 things in Vrindavan. One thing was something that he had done already in Jagannath Puri, Mahaprabhu's presence. Or both were actually things that he had been trained to do there in Jagannath Puri. The first thing was cooking. When Rupa Goswami started worshipping Govindadev, it was Raghunath Bhatta who became the cook for Govindadev. So he used to cook for Govindadev every day and for all the Vaishnavas. And again, I would so much like to go with that time machine to see what kind of cooking he was doing. Because of course, this was the time when Vrindavan was still very much undeveloped. So it probably wasn't any big feasts of all of these kind of wonderful preparations that we can read about in the scriptures. Probably it was quite simple things, but nevertheless, what kind of nectar it must have been. But Raghunath Bhatta Goswami was, like most cooks, a very artistic person. It's quite interesting that most people who are good cooks are also good with other kinds of art. Raghunath Bhatta was also a very good reader of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We don't hear of him as a theologian, but he was a very good reader of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He could read it beautifully. He could chant the verses in 4 or 5 different melodies. And he could also sing for Krishna. There's a temple in Vrindavan called the Bhattaji Mandir, which is maintained by a line of priests that are somehow connected with Raghunath Bhatta. I forget exactly how, but they have that temple, and they maintain a tradition there of Gaudiya Vaishnava music and singing that stems from Raghunath Bhatta. They also have a beautiful manuscript there of the Bhagavatam, which they say was the very Bhagavatam that Mahaprabhu gave to Raghunath Bhatta when he went to Vrindavan. They say that Mahaprabhu gave him a handwritten copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam that he would then use when he was reading to the other Goswamis. Unfortunately, that manuscript is quite evidently a fake. It's not 16th century. It's maybe 100 years old or something at most. But still, the place is quite beautiful, and the very fact that they maintain this tradition of Vaishnava music that Raghunath Bhatta was so engaged in is, to me, very beautiful. The second of our three persons today is the other Raghunath, Raghunath Das Goswami. Sometimes these two are called the two Raghus, Raghu Yuga, the two Raghus. Raghunath Das Goswami, he is special among the six Goswamis by being the only Goswami who was not a Brahmin by birth. All of the other six Goswamis are Brahmins, also Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. Raghunath Das was a Kayastha. Kayasthas. A Kayastha is a particular kind of caste that is basically found only in Bengal. Kayasthas, Vaidyas. These are castes of people who are technically Shudras, because in the Bengali caste system, there are only Brahmins and Shudras. There are no Kshatriyas or Vaishyas. For some reason, these are the only castes that are available there. So Kayasthas are Shudras, but they think of themselves as being a little bit better than other Shudras. So they kind of occupy some kind of middle space between Brahmins and other kinds of Shudras, like Vaidyas. They sometimes wear the holy thread. They follow Brahminical rules in different ways. Raghunath Das was a Kayastha, but he was also very rich. His father was called Govardhan Majumdar, and his uncle was called Hiranya Majumdar. And these two were landholders or jamidaris in a place called Saptagram. Saptagram in the 16th century was the most important city in all of Bengal, at least when it comes to trading. It was situated on the I forget the name of the river. Anyway, all of Bengal is situated in a place which is filled with rivers, these tributaries of the Ganges. But since so much water is coming there every year, and so much silt is coming all the way from the Himalayas, the landscape has changed a lot in 500 years. So Saptagrama, which was situated very well in the 15th century, today is situated, it's still there, but it's a small place situated by a very small river that nobody could drive any boats up along. So the place has changed completely. But in those days, it was a booming market town. So these two brothers, Hiranya and Govardhan, they lived there. They were landholders. They were heavily invested in trade. They were also, like many of the associates of Mahaprabhu, they were also heavily invested in politics of the day. They were supporters of the king of Bengal, Alauddin Shah, the Muslim king of Bengal of those days. We are kind of accustomed to hearing stories about bad Muslims and so on, but actually most of the Vaishnavas of the 16th century in Bengal, they really liked this king. He was a good king in many ways. Of course, later on he made war against Orissa, and that wasn't too popular. But before that, he was very popular with the Vaishnavas, and many Vaishnavas were working were working for this king in different ways. Many. Hiranya and Govardhan, they were tax collectors. They used to collect taxes for the king. And being a tax collector in those days was a very lucrative business, because the system was that you would collect taxes and then give the taxes to the king, but you got to keep something for yourself. well, you got a commission. Today we will call these kind of people like mafia dons or something like that. But in those days, this was a standard procedure in many different places. So Hiranya and Govardhan Majumdar, they were filthy rich. They were among the richest persons in Bengal of their day, especially since they had a special deal with the king. They would give all the taxes directly to the king. Mostly these tax collectors had to give to another person who would then give to the king, and that person would also take some commission in between. So they had a special relationship with the king. They were very wealthy, and they were also Vaishnavas. They were supporters of Mahaprabhu. They helped arrange for marriages in the community. They paid for the devotees who went on pilgrimage. Very important householder devotees of Mahaprabhu. And Raghunath Das was their son. So he was set to inherit this big commercial enterprise. But he wasn't interested. Since his childhood, he had a very strong religious bent. And he met Mahaprabhu when Mahaprabhu was in Shantipur on his way to Jagannath Puri. He met him again when he came on his way to Vrindavan the first time. So he met Mahaprabhu several times, and he tried to run away from home to join Mahaprabhu. When he met Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu told him, "Don't be a crazy person. Why are you running away like that? Just stay at home, do your worldly duties, and think of Krishna." He gave a funny example. He said, "Be like an unfaithful woman." That the idea is that a woman who has an affair with somebody else, she will take care of her household duties even more carefully than others, so that nobody will suspect anything. So he said, be like this. Do your worldly duties extra well, but think of Krishna all the time in your heart. So he tried to do like this, Raghunath Das, but he couldn't. He couldn't. He was so hungry for the association of the devotees. His parents were devotees, but he was so hungry for the association of these renunciant devotees, Mahaprabhu himself and his close entourage of devotees. Finally, he met Nityananda Prabhu. Nityananda Prabhu gave him the opportunity to serve the Vaishnavas, to make a big festival. And this is one of the most important teachings of this story. He got the opportunity to serve the devotees. And when he did everything he could. And Nityananda told him, make a simple festival, just distribute some flattened rice, chipped rice, and yogurt and some fruits. Kind of simple things. But he did so on a very huge scale, and he also he added some sweets, and you can go and you can listen to some of Guru Maharaj's talks about this festival. He gave talks on this festival many times in years gone by, and he described it in very beautiful ways. One of my favorite things that Guru Maharaj often mentions about this festival that Raghunath Das put on for the Vaishnavas is that when local people heard that he's doing this festival, they tried to cash in on the festival. So they put up these stalls just outside the festival ground where they would sell things to the persons coming to the festival. So kind of in a calculative way, like using Raghunath Das's festival for their own gain. And what did Raghunath Das do? He went to those stalls and he bought everything and distributed to the Vaishnavas. I think this is such an inspiring way that he didn't care that these people are kind of trying to piggyback on his thing. He just used whatever they were doing for the service of the Vaishnavas. So he did this festival. It's still commemorated. It's the day after the Bhima Ekadashi in the spring or early summer. It's called the Panihati Chira Dahi festival. Chira Doi means chipped rice and yogurt. That's the main preparation for this festival. And Nityananda Prabhu was very happy with him. So he blessed him that you will attain very soon the company of Mahaprabhu. And this is what happened. Raghunath Das was always trying to find an opportunity to run away. His parents would always catch him and bring him back. But this time, he was always surrounded by guards and other people to make sure that he doesn't go somewhere. But Yadunandana Acharya, who was the family priest of the Majumdars, he came to him one night and told him that, Raghunath, I need your help. That one of my disciples, who's a priest in one temple, he has gone away. He has blooped, basically. He's left his service and he's gone away. Can you come and speak with him? Because he likes you. So try to tell him to come back and take up his service. We're in trouble because he's run away like that. So Raghunath Das immediately realized, aha, maybe this is my chance. So he said to all the others, yeah, you have to go with Yadunandan Acharya. They were like, oh, yes, go with Guruji. So he went with Yadunandan Acharya. And then on the way, he said, actually, I think it would be less awkward for this disciple if I would just go on my own. If you also come, Guruji, then he will feel pressured and there might be some anxiety and so on. I'll just go on my own and speak with him. And Yadunandan Acharya said, yes, good idea. Yeah, let's do like this. So he went on his own, and immediately when Yadunandan Acharya was out of sight, he turned his steps and he went away. And this was the time when the devotees were going for Ratha Yatra. So he knew he could go and join Shivananda Sena and the other devotees going to Jagannath Puri. But he knew if he would do that, he would immediately be found. So instead, he went on these back ways. He went to Jagannath Puri, but on his own for I forget how many days, maybe 10 days or 12 days. He walked from Bengal to Jagannath Puri, stopping to eat just for a few times, sleeping just a little bit in some ditch here and there, until finally he came to Jagannath Puri. And Mahaprabhu was very, very happy to meet him. He said, my friend, you have escaped from the deep latrine of family life. This is very fun for us Grihastas to hear. You have escaped from the deep latrine of family life. And the worst thing is that this family life that he escaped from was from Vaishnava family life. His parents were Vaishnavas. His father was a Vaishnava and his uncle was a Vaishnava. But the reason why Mahaprabhu said like this was not really because he didn't like Hiranya and Govardhan. He did. He loved them very much. But for Raghunath Das, this was not the right place to be. He never told Hiranya and Govardhan to take sannyas or become Babajis or something like this. But Raghunath Das was not in the right place. His heart was with Mahaprabhu. He couldn't take up the service of the Grihastha ashram. He needed to have a different kind of service. So for him, the Grihastha ashram was a deep well of attachment. We know the story, Raghunath Das. He stayed with Mahaprabhu for many years. I think he stayed with him for 16 years in Jagannath Puri. Mahaprabhu gave him to Swarup Damodar because he had many people who wanted to be with him, and he couldn't kind of take care of them all. So he would kind of give different devotees to senior devotees to take care of. And the younger devotees would serve the senior devotees, and senior devotees would teach the younger devotees. So Raghunath Das was given to Swarup Damodar, and he was called Sharupe Raghu, Sharup Damodar's Raghunath, because there were other Raghunaths in Jagannath Puri at the same time. And he learned everything from Swarupa Damodar. He lived a very austere life there in Jagannath Puri. At first, when his parents finally got to know that he had come there to Jagannath Puri, they wanted to bring him back, but when they realized he would not come, and he already had come there to Mahaprabhu, so they couldn't kind of just take him back like they had done before. So they finally gave up, and they thought, okay, maybe he needs to be there. And they would send him servants, and they would send him money, and he wouldn't accept it, but he would accept the money, and with the money he would make feasts for Mahaprabhu. I think maybe on Dvadashi twice a month or something like that. But then after a while he started to think, no, this money is from materialists. And again, remember, this is Vaishnavas the money is coming from. But he thought that these Vaishnavas were kind of materialists. So it's better that I don't give this money to Mahaprabhu. This prasadam that has been made with this materialistic money, that will be contaminating. So he stopped doing that, and Mahaprabhu was very happy when he heard it. So he always encouraged his renunciation. Then he started begging for his sustenance outside of the Singadvara door, outside the Sri Mandir, the temple of Jagannath. When the pujaris would come out of the temple in the evening, they would give some prasadam to Vaishnavas standing outside of the gate. And he would get something and he would live on that. But then after a while, he started to think that this is a waste of time. I have to stand there and wait for such a long time. And in that time, I could do some seva instead. So instead, he stopped doing that, and he would go to an almshouse in the middle of the day and just accept some very simple prasadam there. And at some point, he even stopped doing that, and he would just take some of the thrown away prasadam that even the local cows thought was too disgusting to eat. But he would take that and he would wash it with some water, and he would eat that. And when Mahaprabhu heard about that, he went to him and he said, "Oh, Raghu, what is it that you're eating? What kind of nectar are you having?" And he took some of it from Raghunath's hand and ate it himself, like it was some huge nectar. And he was even going to take another piece, but then Swarupa Damodar stopped him and said, "No, my lord, this is not for you." So Mahaprabhu really encouraged this intensive tapasya, intensive renunciation, because Raghunath Das, he had the inclination for this, and more importantly, all of this renunciation made him more and more Krishna conscious. It didn't make him puffed up. It didn't make him hard-hearted. It just made him more and more Krishna conscious. This, of course, is the whole meaning of renunciation in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's supposed to make us more Krishna conscious, less Netflix conscious, less whatever conscious, and more Krishna conscious. If it doesn't work like that, then that's not Krishna conscious renunciation. Then it is what Bhaktisiddhanta and Rupa Goswami call Phalgu Vairagya, or false renunciation. Raghunath Das's renunciation was never like that. Eventually, after Mahaprabhu and his closest associates, such as Swarupa Damodar, left this world, Raghunath Das fell into a deep kind of depression, and he was considering ending his own life. And he went to Vrindavan thinking to jump off Govardhan Hill and end his life. But Rupa and Sanatan, they encouraged him and made him realize that this was not a Vaishnava thing to do. So instead, he took up residence in Vraja, eventually in Arit or Radhakund. And Raghunath Das was the one who really developed Radhakund into a Gaudiya Vaishnava holy place. It was during his time that Radhakund was excavated from the kind of natural pond that it was in those days into a kund, not as large as the one that we see today, but still a kind of half artificial kund. And he spent most of his days there in Radhakund, and that's where his samadhi is also. Raghunath Das is famous also in Vrindavan for his austerities, even to such an extent that the other Goswamis would sometimes tell him off. Like he would sit in the afternoon sunlight meditating on Radha Krishna's Leelas, and the sun was so heavy on his head that Radharani herself had to come and with her shawl kind of shade him from the sun. And when Rupa and Sanatana Goswami saw that, they told off Raghunath Das that you can't live in such a way that you force Radha to serve you. We are supposed to serve Radha. So then he let people make a bhajan kutir for him. There's also a story about Vittalnath. Vittalnath was the son of Vallabhacharya, another great Vaishnava of this period. And Vittalnath, he had his headquarters at Govardhan, and he was good friends with Raghunath Das. This was still the time before these two sampradayas kind of went in different directions. So Raghunath Das, he's mentioning Vittalnath in some of his writings. And Vittalnath loved Raghunath Das. And once when Raghunath Das was sick, he sent a doctor to look after him. And the doctor said that this Babaji is sick because he's been eating too much sweet rice. And everybody was like, come on, that's impossible. Raghunath Das, he's eating like half a chapati every Ekadashi, or no, not an Ekadashi, every Dvadashi he's eating half a chapati or something like that. Like he's eating practically nothing. And you're saying that he's sick because he's eaten too much sweet rice. That's impossible. What kind of doctor are you? But Raghunath, with a feeble voice, he said, no, it's actually true that I was serving yesterday Radha and Krishna in my mind. And then after they had eaten, I had their Mahaprasadam. And that's why I got sick, because I ate too much of it. So he got sick from eating too much in his mind. This says something about what kind of a Vaishnava he was, that his meditation was more real than his, so to speak, real life. Raghunath Das was the only one of the Goswamis who was not a Brahmin, but he was well educated nevertheless, and he wrote 3 books. He didn't write any theology. He was not a teacher. Excuse me, he was not a teacher in the same way as Rupa, Sanatana, and Jiva Goswami, but he did write 3 books. One of them is not really a book, it's more like a collection of prayers, the Stavavali, collection of prayers and ashtakas and poems. And then there's 2 books called Charita, Mukta Charita and Dana Keli Charita. Charita means story. So these books are Leela books, story books. Thank you, madam. Mukta Charita means the pearl story, and it tells the story of how Krishna fools the gopis into planting pearls, thinking that they will grow into pearl bushes with more pearls growing on them. And the Danakeli Charita speaks about the Danakeli, or the toll Leela, when Krishna and the gopis fight about paying toll. So these kind of like funny books, really, both of them, which I think is really nice to think about, that this strict and austere Raghunath Das, who's sitting there and eating half a chapati every 2 weeks or something like that, he actually had a great sense of humor. When he is thinking about Radha and Krishna, he's thinking about Radha and Krishna in very kind of, we could call transcendentally erotic way. He's very much invested into Parakiya Bhava and Manjari Seva and all of these things. But also he's so much relishing humor. So both this Mukta Charita and Danakeli Charita, they are all like totally hilarious texts, really kind of bringing a light side to all of these things that we're speaking about. The third person that we are celebrating today is Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami. He's not one of the 6 Goswamis, but he's sometimes counted among the 8 Goswamis of Vrindavan, together with Lokanath Goswami and the 6 Goswamis. He was also from Bengal. One of the 6 Goswamis is not from Bengal, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, but all the others are from Bengal. Even Raghunath Bhatta, even though he was born in Varanasi, his parents were from Bengal. So Krishnadas, he was also from Bengal, from Bardhaman. He tells his own story in brief in Chaitanya Charitamrita, how he had a dream of Nityananda in his youth. He went to Vrindavan. And he's mentioned in the texts of the Goswamis already from around maybe 1540. He's mentioned in, for example, in the Hari Bhakti Vilasa in the beginning, together with Rupa and Sanatan. So he was there quite early. He came there as a young man, and he got the title of Kaviraja or Kavi Bhupati quite early in his life. And he got this title for a book called Govinda Lilamrita. Govinda Lilamrita is based on a series of verses by Rupa Goswami that delineates the 8 daily Leelas, or the 8 periods of the daily Leela of Radha and Krishna. Rupa Goswami has written these very kind of terse verses, and Krishnadas then expands all of that into a big book written in very kind of sophisticated and quite artful Sanskrit, with lots of different literary devices, kind of hard to read, but also very masterful. And he describes all of these Leelas in great detail. And for example, all the persons mentioned by by Rupa Goswami in Radha Krishna Ganodesha Deepika, there Rupa Goswami, he goes through all these different persons in the Leela. He mentions that there's this hairdresser, there is this person, there is that person. All of those persons are in Govinda Lilamrita. So Krishnadas, he really brings to life the Leela that Rupa Goswami is just kind of hinting at. Krishnadas wrote that book quite early in his life. And the amazing thing is that he got this title of Kaviraja, the king of poets. Imagine if Guru Maharaj would give me that, Bhrigupada, from now on, everybody should call you Kaviraja. I would get so puffed up. My head would like balloon into like a huge watermelon. But Krishnadas did not. Krishnadas always remained a very humble devotee. And that's one of the most important, to me, lessons of Krishnadas' life. He is this person who gets lots of recognition already in his youth, but he doesn't let it distract him. He remains there in Vrindavan, serving the Vaishnavas, studying from Raghunath Das. Raghunath Das was his main teacher in Vrindavan. Raghunath Das, who was the only non-Brahmin among the Goswamis. So Raghunath Das, he functioned as a guru, as a Shiksha guru, without being a Brahmin. And practically everything in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Krishnadas writes about Mahaprabhu, when it comes to these things that haven't been covered in the earlier biographies, the last part of Mahaprabhu's life in Jagannath Puri, it's all from Raghunath Das. It's all from Raghunath Das. So Krishnadas, in his Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's really taking the teachings that he's gotten from his gurus and putting them into the Bengali language. Because, of course, the Chaitanya Charitamrita is what we really know Krishnadas from. He wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita in his old age. He lived to about 100 years old or something like that. And he wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the beginning of the 17th century, when all of the other Goswamis had already passed away, except Jiva Goswami. So he condensed into that book everything that he had learned about Mahaprabhu, but also everything that he had learned from the different Goswamis, their theology, the theology of Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami. And he put that into the story of Mahaprabhu's life. So through Mahaprabhu's life, he's telling the whole theology of the Gaudiya Vaishnava school. And he's presenting all of these things in such a masterful way that the Chaitanya Charitamrita becomes what one leading Vaishnava or scholar of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Tony Stewart, calls the final word. That the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it becomes the final word on who Mahaprabhu really is. So it's a hugely influential text in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. It kind of sets the standard for how to understand Mahaprabhu and also for how to understand the teachings of the Goswamis. So we are so indebted to Krishnadas Kaviraja for the Govinda Lilamrita, but even more for the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Chaitanya Charitamrita became a very popular text in Bengal. It's probably the one text that is found in most manuscripts all over Bengal. There are literally thousands of manuscripts of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it was read widely all over Bengal. And it really kind of created this kind of orthodox presentation of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Just like with the other Goswamis, Krishnadas also had a more playful side to him. Krishnadas was an intensely artistic person, like we can see from his Govinda Lilamrita. And what did I just say about artists? Artists are often also good cooks. And it seems to have been the same with Krishnadas, because he's very interested in food in his books, both in the Govinda Lilamrita in his youth and also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in his old age. There are so many descriptions of feasts in these books, and almost like recipes even for what kind of things they were eating. In the Antyalila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, for example, you can read about Damayanti's bag. There's this one Vaishnavi who used to send food to Mahaprabhu to Jagannath Puri every year. She would make these kind of like preserves and candies and things that would last for a long time, like candied ginger and these kind of syrup balls with spices and things like that. And she would send that in a special bag to Mahaprabhu every year. And Krishnadas describes all of those things in great detail, and you really become hungry when you read it, and especially if you have a bit of a cold like I'm having right now, I really would like to have Damayanti's bag here somewhere nearby. So in this way, we can meditate and think of and glorify these Bhagavatas on a day like this, these three wonderful Bhagavatas who have all had their own role to play in the development of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. And if we can make this kind of glorification of the Bhagavata, this kind of service of the Bhagavata into a regular affair, then, just as the Srimad Bhagavatam tells us, then we can look forward to almost all of the inauspicious things of the heart being cleansed away and bhakti being established in the heart as an irrevocable fact. Thank you all, dear devotees. Any questions or comments before ending for today?
Pranam. Thank you for the Vaishnav Katha. I just had a question that came up, that just came to mind when you mentioned Vaishnavas working for this Muslim king. And that was just that I remember reading, you know, how those Vaishnavas couldn't later on visit the temple in Jagannath Puri because they had been in touch with the Muslims, or like worked in the government. But how do you think at that time they would be recognized as such? Like, if they would come and try to enter the temple, how would people see that these have been working in the Muslim government? Were they just that famous, or they just wouldn't try to enter?
Well, who would be an example of such a devotee?
Rupa, Sanatan, Haridas Thakur.
Well, that we have two different categories here. And it's important also to note that none of these tried to enter the temple and then were banned from entering it.
I see.
Haridas, he didn't even try to enter it because he was Muslim by birth. He was Muslim. So he himself thought that I'm not qualified to enter the temple. Maybe they would have recognized him, the guards, and said that you're not allowed. We have no idea of knowing because he didn't try. Same with Rupa and Sanatan. But the reason for why they did not enter the temple was not that they had worked for the Muslim government. We sometimes hear that in modern sources, but it's not mentioned like that in any ancient sources. And there are many others who certainly entered the temple again and again, who had been working for the Muslim government. Shivananda Sena and others who were in different ways connected with the government. The reason for why Rupa and Sanatan did not enter the temple was that they considered themselves fallen. Sanatan Goswami says that he belongs to a Nicha Jati. He belongs to a fallen, he's fallen by birth. This means not that he's fallen because something he has done, but he's fallen because of something that his ancestors have done. And we don't know exactly what that refers to. Scholars have speculated in different ways, and it may be that one of his ancestors had done something that had compromised his caste. Perhaps he had been a drunkard, or perhaps he has an ancestor who had converted to Islam, for example. There may be something like this. But Joseph O'Connell, a scholar of Gaudiya Vaishnavism who passed away maybe 10 years or so ago, he has an article that you can look up and read about these Vaishnavas who worked for the Muslim government. And there were many. And there are actually no signs that any of these were discriminated against on religious reasons. This is a later construction from a time when relationships between Hindus and Muslims become more problematic. So, and if you read, for example, if you read the Chaitanya Bhagavata, there's a whole description about when Mahaprabhu comes to Bengal on his way to Vrindavan the first time. He doesn't meet with the king of Bengal, but the king of Bengal sends out his spies to find out who is this sadhu with so many followers. And they come to him with a description, and he says, oh, he's a great saint. You should make sure that nobody does anything to him. He should be treated with great respect. And he's saying, I think, if I remember correctly, he says that he is God. So Vaishnavas in those days, they thought that this king was almost like a Vaishnava. They really saw him as a good king, even though he was Muslim. And I'm mentioning this because just to kind of nuance this picture that we have of evil, demonic Muslim kings. It's not always so black and white like that.
Thank you.
Again, dear devotees, thank you for attending. Thank you, Ananga Manjari, for translating. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Davika Giridhari Shri Radha Madan Mohan Radha Govinda Radha Gopinatha Radha Damodar Radha Shama Sundara Radha Ramana Radha Gokulananda Radha Madhava Gopal Nitai Gaur Shri Shadabut Giriraj Ki Jai. Jai Mshubhad Parang Super Rajakacharya Stotra Shtashi Shrimad Bhakti Vedanta Tripurari Goswamaraj Gurudev Ki Jai. Jai Guru Parampara Ki Jai. Jai Raghunath Bhatta Goswami Ki Jai. Jai Raghunath Das Goswami Ki Jai. Jai Shri Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami Ki Jai. Jai Ananta Gada Vaishnava Ki Jai. Bhuvan Mangal Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo.
Shriman Bhrigupada Prabhu ki jai.
Jai Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai.